So, hi, I'm gonna talk about PFP compressed suffix tree, and this is a joint work with Christina Boucher, Ondrej Cvacho, Gagie, Holub, Giovanni Manzini, and Gonzalo Navarro, and this was presented at ALENX this year. So, let's start. Okay, suffix trees. So the suffix tree is one of the most powerful data structure in stringology and bioinformatics, and it was introduced by Weiner in 1973, and is the compact tree of the suffixes of the string. It is extremely powerful. It is able to index all the quadratic number of substring of a string in linear time and space. And it's heavily applied in stringology and bioinformatics. And for example, you can find maximal unique matches, maximal exact matches, tandem repeats, and many other things. And those all those has application in bioinformatics like sequence alignment, short read alignment, and so on. Okay, now we are talking about bioinformatics. So why don't we want to index one human chromosome? For example, the chromosome 19 with just one C and not two Cs. So the chromosome 19 is 48.5 megabytes pairs long, and it can be compressed using gzip into 16 megabytes. With a classical implementation of a suffix tree, we will need 1.2 gigabytes to index just one chromosome 19. We want to scale up. So let's say that we take 512 human chromosome 19 haplotypes from the 1000 genome project, which are like around 30 gigabytes pairs, which is more than one full human genome, which is 3 gigabytes pairs, more or less. They can be compressed in 7.5 gigabytes using gzip. And the classical implementation of the suffix tree is around 600 gigabytes, and we need something smaller, of course. So in 2007, the compressed suffix trees came along with full functionalities. And the idea is to use some other data structures like suffix array, inverse suffix array, and LCP array, and some other operations like range minimum queries, next smaller value, and previous smaller value on the LCP array to simulate all the functionality of the suffix tree. So on one human chromosome 19, we took the implementation of the compressed suffix tree from SDSL, and we were able to build the compressed suffix tree in 32 seconds using just 64 megabytes. This is the final size of the data structure, which is a bit smaller than 1.2 gigabytes. And we use 2.1 gigabyte of working memory. Then we tried to scale up to 512 chromosome 19. And well, the final data structure is small, is 28 gigabytes compared to the 600 gigabytes of the classical data structure. And it took 16 hours and 30 minutes, more or less, and 1 terabyte of working memory. So the final index is small, but the working memory does not scale very well. And to use an index, one must first build it. Okay. Now, what we did, we used the prefix reparsing as a data structure. So I will tell you later what the prefix reparsing is. And we simulate the suffix tree functionalities using a slightly different set of operations than the one that I told you before. And we use random access to suffix array, inverse suffix array, and the text. And we combine the operation of longest common extension plus the suffix array query to simulate the LCP and the range minimum query on the LCP. And we implemented other two operations called prev and next to simulate the previous smaller value and next smaller value on the LCP array. We tested on one human chromosome 19, and the final size of the data structure is not very good because it's 1.6 gigabyte, and we took like 1 minute to be built. we tried to index 512 human chromosome 19. Well, now the data size of the data structure is much better because it's 19 gigabytes. It's smaller than the SDSL1. It took only 30 minutes to build the suffix tree, and it took just 27.5 gigabytes of working memory, which is quite good. So we did some experiments on a 40-core machine with 756 gigabytes of RAM, and we tested our approach against SDSL, the compressed suffix tree, and the block tree compressed suffix tree. So here you can see the running time for the construction of the compressed suffix tree. So we are the yellow one, the orange one, and we are pretty fast. So SDSL scale almost linearly, as well as the block tree suffix tree, while our construction time scale quite logarithmically. So this scale is logarithmic scale. So we are pretty fast, and also we were able to build the data structure for 1,000 copies of the chromosome 19, not just 512. And for the memory construction, so the final size for SDSL and the block tree, compressed suffix tree, is almost always smaller than ours. But eventually we will become smaller than SDSL. But the interesting part is about the working memory. So the gap between the working memory of our solution compared to the gap between the working memory and the final size of the data structure of the SDSL is much smaller on our solution. And this is why we managed to build the compressed suffix tree for 1,000 copies of chromosome 19. We also tested on 10,000 salmonella genomes. The results are in the paper that we published in at RNX this year. And the trend are very similar on both the running time and the memory construction. Okay, so how we did that? We used the prefix reparsing, which is a pre-processing step that was used to build the BWT for very large data set. So the idea is that here we have our text. So we consider the text S to be cyclic, and we append W copies of a special character dash at the end. Now, we take a set of strings of length W, which are called trigger strings, and we go along the text and we mark all the occurrences of those strings in the text. So now in practice, we don't choose a set of strings. We just use a rolling hash, and we mark all the position in which this rolling hash modulo some other parameter becomes equal to 0. So now what we do is we parse the text as this way. So we first extract the phrases, and a phrase is defined as follows. So a phrase starts at the beginning of a trigger string and ends at the end of the next trigger string. So we have those phrases overlaps by W characters between two consecutive phrases. We take all those phrases, we put them all together in a dictionary, and we sort them lexicographically. And now we assign to each phrase a meta character, which is the lexicographic rank of this phrase in the dictionary. Now, the important thing is that the set of the phrase is prefix free. This is why it's called prefix reparsing, which means that no phrase is a prefix of any other phrase in this set. And this is important because this property is used to build the BWT, but now we will use it for our operations. So, as I told you before, now we are not using the prefix tree as prefix reparsing as a preprocessing step, but as a data structure. So we want, as I told you before, simulate the suffix tree functionalities via random access to suffix array, inverse suffix array, and the string. we want to use the longest common extension operation, which we have two positions in the text, and we want to find the longest common prefix between those two suffixes of the text. So given the LCE operation and the suffix array operation, we can simulate random access to the LCP array, and we can compute the smallest values in one LCP interval using the LCE. And then we also implement two other operations, which is previous IH and next IH, which is the closest position preceding and following I with LCP smaller than H. So given a position I in the LCP, we want to find the previous and the next position smaller than H. So we need to implement some primitives, which are those ones, to implement the suffix tree functionality. And we need a set of data structures on the prefix reparsing, built on the prefix reparsing. I am not going to explain all of them because I don't have time. I will try to show you how to do an LCE operation and random access on the suffix array. The inverse suffix array is basically the same operation. So let's start with the LCE. So we have our text. We first consider here the lexicographically sorted phrases of the suffixes of D. So the suffixes are the one in black, and the gray part here is just to remember from which phrase this suffix comes from. And we have an LCP array here. We also consider the lexicographically sorted suffixes of the parts. And we have a special LCP array. So this is an LCP array, but the longest common prefix is counted in characters. So this suffix corresponds to a suffix of the text. So we just compute the longest common prefix in characters. Now, let's say that we want to compute the longest common extension between those two positions in the text. So what we do, we first use the parts to find the occurrence of this character into the corresponding phrase in the dictionary. And the same for this position. And now what we can do, we can look for those two suffixes in the lexicographically sorted phrases of the suffixes of D, and we can use the LCP array to compute the longest common prefix between those two suffixes. Now, if the longest common prefix between those two suffixes is smaller than the length of the suffix, then we are done. In this case, this LCP value is equal. So what does it mean? It means that the longest common prefix may extend after these phrases. So what we can do, we can find the next phrase in the parse. So those are two suffixes of the parse. So we can find them in the lexicographically sorted suffixes of P, and we can query the SLCP array here, which tells us that their longest common prefix is 8. And then we need to remove W characters, value W. Why? Because we are counting AC twice. Because we are counting the AC here, but we are also counting AC here as a prefix of D2 and D2. Okay? So LCE queries are done. And the LCE. Now, how can we do suffix array operations? So let's first consider the lexicographically sorted suffixes of the string. Now, the first observation is that each suffix of the string starts with a proper phrase suffix of length at least W. So each of these suffixes start with a proper phrase suffix of length at least W. And here in red, I've marked all those proper phrase suffixes. Now, the first thing that we do, we build a bit vector, which for some other reason is called BBWT. And the property, and this bit vector marks the first occurrence of this proper phrase suffix. So this is the first occurrence of the proper phrase suffix T dash. This is the first occurrence of the proper phrase suffix TAC. This is the second one. So what does it mean? It means that a rank of this bit vector up to this position tells me which is the lexicographic rank of this proper phrase suffix. Okay, we will use it later. Now, second observation. So here we have our lexicographic sorted suffixes of S. Now, we also consider the lexicographic sorted suffixes of P. And we can observe that the relative order of the suffixes of S, starting with the same proper phrase suffix, is given by the relative order of the corresponding suffixes of P. So if we consider those two suffixes, then we can see that their relative order is given by those two suffixes of P, which are the suffixes starting after the phrase that contains those two suffixes. Okay, are those two suffixes here, and their relative order is preserved in the order of the suffixes of P. And again, this is equivalent to find the relative order in the BWT of the parts. And we just need to find to the phrase identifier that contains this suffix. Okay, and the relative order gives us the relative order of the two suffixes of the string. So we want to find the relative order of the occurrences in the BWT of the parts of the phrases with the same proper phrase suffix. So how we do that? We build a grid in which on the columns we have the BWT of the parts, and on the rows we have the colexicographically sorted phrases of the dictionary. Why? Because here you see that two phrases which has the same suffix are grouped together. So we can find the relative order of the occurrences of the BWT of P in this box. All the points in this box, reading from left to right, gives us the correct order. So how we do the suffix array operation? So let's say that we want to find the suffix array entry at this position. We first use the BBWT to compute the lexicographic rank of the proper phrase suffix of length at least W. And this gives us this interval here because we pre-computed them. And those are just the number of ones in this BWT number. Okay, and now we know that this is the second suffix that starts with this proper phrase suffix. So it's the second point in this interval. So now we can take the phrase, this point starts, is D4. So we do an inverse suffix array of P query, and we find this position by just considering the length of this suffix, so the offset of this position within the phrase. Okay, we did some tests, and okay, I have some time. Yes. Okay, we did some tests, performed some queries on our data structure. So not all the queries are fast as we would, mainly because of the way how the grid for the suffix array queries is implemented, which is a wavelet tree, which introduce a log p factor in the query time. But not all the queries, because some of the queries are on par with the other methods. And this is a full task in which we computed the matching statistics of a pattern. And we can see that the time is not so far from the time of SDSL in this case. But to use an index, one must first build it. And if we consider the construction time in the query time, and in particular in the full task, then we are faster than our competitors. And we build it. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the talk. Very nice. So we already have one question. It is slide number 5. For small inputs, the SDSL structure is smaller than the PFP structure, but uses more working memory to construct. Is it possible to transform from PFP to SDSL using small working memory?
Okay, this is a good question. so it's not immediate. I mean, we can use the prefix reparsing to build the information that is required to SDSL to build their data structure. So we can somehow be used as a buffer. But I don't know how much time would it take to implement all those things. I think that is possible. I'm not sure how much, or if we can build all the informations that are necessary for SDSL to build their compressed suffix tree. Maybe the only problem would be if we need to build the shape of the tree. So this may be the only bottleneck that I can see in using the prefix reparsing to build the SDSL data structure.
Okay, thank you.